There are moments in life when a person begins to feel a strange uneasiness with the role they have been playing. The smile feels rehearsed. The words feel borrowed. The personality itself begins to feel like a carefully crafted disguise, rather than the truth of who one actually is. Many people spend years mastering this disguise, polishing it, presenting it to the world so convincingly that even they begin to believe it is real. Yet deep within the soul there remains a quiet voice that refuses to agree with the performance. It whispers that something sacred has been buried beneath layers of expectation, fear, and survival. A mask, after all, is not always worn out of deception. Sometimes it is worn out of protection. From childhood, people learn quickly that the world rewards certain behaviors and punishes others. They learn to hide their wounds, silence their questions, and dim the peculiar light that makes them different. Over time, they create a version of themselves that seems acceptable, manageable, and safe. This version speaks politely, behaves predictably, and rarely threatens the comfort of others. Society applauds it. Friends recognize it, but heaven does not always recognize it. For the truth is that the soul was never designed to live behind a mask forever. The human spirit was created with a particular purpose, a calling that is not accidental or interchangeable. Each life carries an assignment, something deeply intentional placed within the architecture of that person's being. When that assignment is small, the mask may survive for quite a while. But when the assignment is royal, when the calling involves influence, transformation, or leadership, the disguise eventually becomes unbearable. There comes a moment when God begins to gently but firmly remove the mask. At first, the process feels confusing. Situations begin to expose the difference between the mask and the true self. The places where one used to feel comfortable suddenly feel restrictive. The conversations that once felt easy now seem hollow. Relationships built around the masked version of the person begin to shift or even dissolve. It can feel like life is unraveling, when in truth it is only revealing. The world often misunderstands this stage. People may assume the individual is changing too much, becoming distant, or even losing their way. But what they fail to see is that the mask was never meant to survive the journey toward destiny. The mask was a temporary shelter, not a permanent identity. Royal assignments require authenticity. A king cannot rule effectively if he hides behind another man's face. A queen cannot guide her people while pretending to be someone she is not. Authority flows from authenticity, and authenticity can only emerge when the false layers are removed. This is why divine preparation often involves uncomfortable exposure. God does not reveal the true self to humiliate a person, but to liberate them. Imagine an actor who has played the same role for so long that he forgets his own name. When the curtain finally closes and the costume is removed, he might feel momentarily lost. Without the script, without the applause, without the familiar lines, he must rediscover who he truly is. Yet it is precisely in that rediscovery that real freedom begins. So it is with the soul. When God begins removing the mask, the person may feel unusually vulnerable. The habits that once protected them no longer work. Yet the personality traits designed to please others start to crumble. Even the opinions of the crowd lose their power. What remains is something both terrifying and magnificent, the unfiltered self. But this exposure is not cruelty. It is preparation. The world is full of people who are excellent performers, but heaven is searching for people who are genuine. A royal assignment cannot be fulfilled by a character. It must be carried by a real person with real convictions, real courage, and real identity. The authority required for such an assignment comes not from imitation but from truth, and truth has a way of dismantling every disguise. There are seasons when a person feels as if their carefully constructed identity is collapsing piece by piece. Careers shift unexpectedly. Relationships change their tone. Even personal ambitions begin to transform. These moments may appear like loss, yet they are often divine editing. God is removing the lines that were never meant to be in the story. The the mask begins to fall. What once seemed essential suddenly feels unnecessary. What once seemed impossible begins to feel inevitable. The person starts noticing qualities within themselves that were hidden for years. Courage they never acknowledged, wisdom they never trusted, authority they never claimed. These qualities were always present, but the mask concealed them. Royalty does not emerge through imitation. It emerges through revelation. A crown, after all, cannot rest on a mask. It must rest upon a real face. A face shaped by experience, humility, and truth. The process of revealing that face, there are moments in life when a person begins to feel a quiet but persistent uneasiness with the role they have been playing. At first it is subtle, almost unnoticeable, like a faint whisper in the background of the mind. Everything on the outside may appear perfectly normal. The routine continues, conversations unfold as usual, and the familiar personality that others have come to expect is still presented to the world. Yet within the inner chambers of the heart, something begins to feel strangely out of place. The smile that once came naturally now feels rehearsed. The words spoken in ordinary conversations begin to sound as though they belong to someone else. Even the way one carries themselves can start to feel like a performance that has been repeated for far too long. Many people spend years, sometimes decades, perfecting this performance. It begins innocently enough in childhood when a person learns that certain parts of themselves are welcomed while other parts are ignored or discouraged. The child quickly discovers that approval often comes with conditions. When they behave a certain way, speak with a particular tone, or hide emotions that make others uncomfortable, they are praised and accepted. But when they reveal their raw thoughts, their questions, or their differences, the reaction is often silence, correction, or misunderstanding. Slowly, almost without realizing it, the child begins to edit themselves. This editing becomes the beginning of the mask. At first, the mask is small. It might simply be the habit of hiding certain feelings, or pretending to enjoy things that do not truly resonate with the soul. But as life continues, the mask grows more elaborate. It learns how to adapt to different environments, different groups of people, and different expectations. In one place, it becomes confident and outspoken. In another, it becomes quiet and agreeable. Around certain individuals, it appears cheerful and light-hearted, while in other spaces, it presents seriousness and control. The mask becomes incredibly skilled at reading the room and shaping itself accordingly. Over time, the performance becomes so convincing that even the one wearing the mask begins to accept it as reality. The lines between the true self and the constructed identity blur together until they are almost indistinguishable. A person may genuinely believe that the personality they display is who they truly are. They may build friendships, careers, and entire lifestyles around this identity, rarely stopping to question whether it reflects the deeper truth of their being. Yet the soul has a remarkable way of refusing to remain silent forever. Somewhere deep within, beyond the layers of habit and expectation, there remains a quiet awareness that something sacred has been hidden. It does not shout or demand attention, but it waits patiently for moments of stillness when it can gently remind the person that the performance is not the whole story. This awareness often emerges during unexpected moments. It may appear in a late-night reflection when the world is quiet and distractions fade away. It may surface during a moment of disappointment when a carefully maintained image fails to produce the satisfaction it promised. Sometimes it appears during success itself, when a person achieves what they once desired only to discover that the fulfillment feels strangely incomplete. These moments are not accidents. They are signals from the deeper self. The uneasiness that begins to grow is not necessarily a sign that life is falling apart. In many cases, it is the first sign that something within the person is waking up. The mask that once felt comfortable begins to feel heavy, almost suffocating. Actions that once seemed natural now require effort. Conversations that once felt smooth begin to feel forced. It is as though the soul has begun to resist the costume it has been wearing. This resistance is often misunderstood because from the outside, nothing appears dramatically wrong. Friends may still see the same familiar personality. Colleagues may still interact with the same dependable version of the person they have always known. Yet internally there is a quiet tension, a growing awareness that the identity presented to the world may only be a carefully arranged version of something much deeper. The strange part of this reality condition is that the mask was never created out of pure dishonesty. Most people did not wake up one day and intentionally decide to become someone they were not. The mask usually forms as a response to survival. It develops in environments where authenticity feels risky, where vulnerability is misunderstood, or where uniqueness is discouraged. In those conditions, the mask becomes a form of protection. It shields the heart from rejection. It softens the sharp edges of individuality so that others feel more comfortable. It allows a person to move through society without drawing too much unwanted attention. Because of this, the mask can feel incredibly valuable. It has served a purpose. It has helped navigate complicated relationships, difficult environments, and uncertain situations. In many ways, it has acted like armor protecting the inner self while the person learns how the world works. But armor is never meant to become skin. There comes a point when the very thing that once protected the soul begins to limit it. What once served as safety begins to feel like confinement. The personality designed to gain approval begins to feel restrictive. The carefully shaped identity starts to feel like a role in a play that has been performed for far too many years without a break. And in the quiet corners of the heart, a question slowly begins to form. A question that cannot easily be ignored. Who am I beneath all of this? May feel unsettling, but it is also sacred. Each layer removed is a step closer to the identity that heaven intended from the beginning. And so the strange discomfort many feel in this season is not evidence of failure. It is evidence that something authentic is beginning to surface. The disguise is loosening. The performance is ending. The real story, the one written long before fear taught the soul to hide, is finally preparing to begin. There comes a moment in every person's life when the carefully constructed layers they have wrapped around themselves begin to feel unbearable. At first, the discomfort is subtle, almost imperceptible. A conversation may leave them feeling hollow. A familiar place may feel constraining, or a relationship may suddenly feel out of alignment. These experiences often provoke confusion, because from the outside, nothing appears to have changed. The same routines are followed, the same behaviors are displayed, and the same smile is worn. Yet internally something has shifted, and the mask that has been so skillfully maintained begins to reveal its limitations. It is in these moments that the process of removal begins. A process that is rarely gentle, often unsettling, but ultimately transformative. The mask, after all, has served a purpose. It has acted as protection, sheltering the vulnerable heart from criticism, disappointment, and misunderstanding. In childhood, the mask often begins as a simple adaptation, hiding a thought, suppressing a feeling, or silencing a question, in order to receive approval or avoid conflict. Over time, these small adjustments accumulate, eventually forming an identity that is both flexible and responsive to the expectations of others. People who encounter the world in this way learn to be excellent performers. They can charm, persuade, and adapt to almost any situation. They become adept at reading moods, predicting reactions, and shaping themselves to fit the desires of those around them. In doing so, they often forget, or at least obscure, the person they were originally meant to be. Yet life has a way of confronting the soul with its own truth. When an individual is called to a higher purpose, something far greater than survival, something that touches destiny itself, the mask can no longer serve its intended function. Situations begin to arise that expose the discrepancy between the surface persona and the inner reality. The behaviors and habits that once protected the person no longer produce the same comfort. The applause that once validated their performance begins to feel empty. Relationships based on the old identity may begin to shift, falter, or even dissolve. These moments are not accidents or random disruptions. They are divine signals that the soul is being prepared for something far beyond the ordinary. The process of mask removal is never instantaneous. It is gradual, deliberate, and often uncomfortable. It may begin with subtle nudges, a quiet dissatisfaction with what once felt sufficient, a lingering sense that life has more to offer, or a sudden insight that challenges long-held beliefs about oneself. Then, circumstances intensify. Challenges emerge that demand authenticity rather than performance. Opportunities arise that require courage rather than conformity. Relationships confront the individual with the need to reveal, to speak, to act in ways that reflect the true self rather than the persona that has been crafted over time. It is in these moments that the protective layers begin to loosen, and the soul starts to sense the freedom that comes from authenticity. To fully embrace this process, one must recognize that the mask is not evil but limited. It has been a servant, not a master. Its purpose was temporary, designed to navigate seasons of fear, uncertainty, or immaturity. However, the mask was never intended to define the individual, to determine their worth, or to limit the impact they were meant to have. The more one clings to the false identity, the more it restricts growth, creativity, and the fulfillment of destiny. The mask, for all its comfort, ultimately hinders the expression of the person's true power, influence, and potential. Royal assignments require authenticity because authority cannot flourish through imitation. The world may honor performance, but divine purpose is realized through truth. A leader cannot inspire others if their heart is hidden behind pretense. A visionary cannot fulfill a calling if their actions are dictated by expectation rather than conviction. Authenticity is not simply about being honest with others. It is about aligning one's life with the intrinsic design and purpose embedded in the soul. Without authenticity, influence is shallow, decisions lack integrity, and the impact remains limited. With authenticity, however, even ordinary actions carry extraordinary weight because they emerge from a place of divine alignment and personal truth. As the mask begins to fall, the process can feel frightening. The familiar protections disappear, leaving the individual feeling exposed and vulnerable. They may experience uncertainty about who they truly are without the identity they have relied upon for so long. Friends may react with confusion, colleagues may misunderstand, and even the individual themselves may question the changes unfolding within them. Yet this vulnerability is a necessary stage in the emergence of true identity. Exposure allows hidden qualities to surface. Courage, resilience, wisdom, and creativity that were previously concealed by the comfort of the mask. It is in this stripped-down state that the soul begins to access the full measure of its potential. The removal of the mask also brings clarity. Where before there was compromise and adaptation, there is now discernment. Choices become aligned with inner truth rather than external expectation. This was the exact moment that priorities are reordered to reflect deeper values and convictions. Relationships are evaluated through the lens of authenticity rather than convenience or conformity. Opportunities that once seemed unattainable suddenly feel aligned with purpose, while those that were once tempting may fall away. The individual begins to notice patterns, gifts, and strengths that were present all along, but were obscured by the disguise. It is a process of reclamation, a reclaiming of the self that has always existed beneath the layers of protection, fear, and expectation. There comes a season in life when a person begins to feel an inner insistence that can no longer be ignored. It is not loud or violent. It is subtle, persistent, and patient. It whispers in quiet moments, nudges in times of reflection, and stirs unease when routines feel safe but empty. This inner insistence often comes when one has been living behind a mask for too long. A mask crafted to protect, to please, or to survive. The mask may have served its purpose, but it is no longer sufficient for the calling that lies ahead. There is a sense that something greater demands the unveiling of the true self, and the soul begins to feel restless, under the weight of its concealment. Masks are complicated things. Masks are complicated things. Masks are complicated things. Masks are complicated things. They are often worn with the best intentions. From childhood, individuals learn that the world is not always receptive to the rawness of the human spirit. Emotions, questions, and quirks that set one apart may be met with judgment, misunderstanding, or even rejection. In response, the individual begins to shape themselves to fit the expectations of others. They learn to perform, to adjust, to anticipate the desires of those around them. Over time, these adjustments harden into a persona, a mask so convincing that even the one wearing it begins to accept it as their true identity. The mask becomes a form of survival, a means of navigating complex relationships, and a way to gain approval and recognition. Yet life has a way of revealing that masks are temporary. When a person is destined for a purpose that surpasses ordinary existence, the mask becomes inadequate. The circumstances of life, the people they encounter, and the challenges they face begin to expose the gaps between the facade and the true self. What once seemed safe and effective now feels constricting. Words spoken in habit lose their meaning. Actions performed out of routine feel hollow. Even relationships and environments that were once comforting begin to feel out of alignment, as if they are pressing against the soul's unspoken truth. These moments are not accidents. They are signs that the mask is ready to be removed. The process of unveiling is rarely comfortable. It begins with small cracks, moments of doubt, restlessness, or dissatisfaction that cannot be ignored. These cracks widen over time, exposing the hidden self to scrutiny, fear, and uncertainty. The person may feel vulnerable, confused, or even anxious, as if the stability they have relied upon is eroding. The familiar routines, habits, and approvals that once offered comfort no longer suffice. There is a growing sense that to fulfill the higher calling within, the layers of protection must fall away. The mask must be set aside, and the soul must stand bare, not in weakness, but in authenticity. Authenticity is essential for those whose assignment is royal in nature. True authority, influence, and leadership cannot be exercised through imitation or performance. A crown cannot rest on a disguise, and a kingdom cannot be governed by a shadow. The mask may have allowed one to navigate life with skill, but it cannot carry the weight of destiny. The divine assignment requires a presence that is real, unfiltered, and aligned with the deepest truths of the individual. The removal of the mask is not punishment. It is preparation. It is a deliberate stripping away of what is unnecessary so that what remains is the strength, clarity, and power inherent in the person's true self. As the mask falls, vulnerability becomes inevitable. The protections that once offered comfort are no longer in place, and the individual may feel exposed. There may be fear of judgment, rejection, or failure. Yet vulnerability is not weakness. It is a conduit for courage and growth. Only when the soul is willing to stand without pretense can it access the qualities that were always present but hidden. Wisdom, creativity, discernment, and authority emerge more vividly in the absence of disguise. The challenges that once seemed daunting are now opportunities for the authentic self to express itself fully and effectively. The removal of the mask also brings clarity. Life begins to align more closely with truth rather than expectation. Decisions are guided by conviction rather than habit. Relationships are evaluated based on authenticity rather than convenience or superficiality. Opportunities that resonate with the deeper calling become apparent, while those that distract or misalign with purpose begin to fade. The individual starts to notice patterns in their life, gifts they had overlooked, and abilities that had been suppressed. These discoveries are not sudden, but they are inevitable once the mask no longer obscures vision. There is a profound liberation in this process. For years, the soul may have labored under the weight of conformity, approval, and fear. The mask, while protective, has also restricted growth and expression. As it falls away, the individual experiences a deep sense of freedom. A freedom to be who they were always meant to be, to speak the truth they have carried, and to act in ways that align with their deepest purpose. The self is no longer hidden behind a performance. It is visible, strong, and ready to fulfill the role for which it was created. In the journey of revealing the true self, one begins to perceive the world differently. The distractions of approval, comparison, and pretense lose their grip. Life gains a sharper focus, and the individual starts moving with intentionality. Actions are no longer dictated by fear of judgment, but guided by alignment with purpose. Thoughts, decisions, and interactions begin to flow from a center of authenticity that was always present but often city. The person realizes that the true measure of authority and impact comes not from imitation, approval, or skillful performance, but from the courage to reveal what is real and to operate from that reality consistently. There are seasons in life when the soul feels restless, even when outwardly everything appears calm and orderly. The routines of daily existence may continue without interruption. The relationships and responsibilities may remain steady, and yet there is an inner stirring that cannot be ignored. It is as if the heart has grown too large for the walls that have contained it for so long, pressing insistently against the masks that have been worn for comfort, protection, or survival. In such moments, the individual begins to sense that the life they have been living, the identity they have been presenting, is insufficient for the calling they are meant to fulfill. There is an awareness, subtle at first, but growing in intensity, that something deeper must emerge, something authentic and unhidden. Masks by their nature are protective devices. They are born from necessity, shaped in the crucible of experience, and refined over years of interaction with the world. As children, individuals learn quickly which parts of themselves are safe to reveal and which parts will attract criticism, misunderstanding, or rejection. In response, they begin to conceal the qualities that make them different, unusual, or misunderstood. Over time, these small acts of concealment accumulate, forming an identity that is adaptive, flexible, and socially acceptable. The mask can appear almost natural after years of practice. It becomes a version of the self that is predictable, agreeable, and palatable to others. It is a necessary instrument of survival, a way to navigate the complexities of society while protecting the tender inner life. Yet masks are never intended to be permanent. They may serve as armor for a time, but the soul was never designed to exist entirely behind a facade. The human spirit carries within it a purpose, a unique assignment that cannot be fully realized when hidden behind pretense. Life, in its mysterious and sometimes subtle ways, begins to press against the mask when it is time for the individual to step into this purpose. Situations arise that reveal the insufficiency of the disguise. Conversations feel empty. Relationships strain. Responsibilities grow heavier, and the skills that once made the performance successful no longer suffice. These experiences are not random or punitive. They are deliberate signals that the soul is being prepared for a higher calling. The removal of the mask is rarely gentle. It begins with small moments of discomfort, a fleeting sense of dissatisfaction, a quiet realization that something is missing, or an unsettling sense that life could be more than it presently appears. As the process continues, the challenges intensify. The familiar habits, routines, and assurances that once offered comfort now feel constraining. Opportunities arise that demand courage rather than conformity. Encounters appear that expose vulnerabilities previously concealed. The protective layers of the persona start to loosen, and the individual is faced with the choice of either clinging to the mask or stepping into authenticity.